How's it going, everyone? I hope you're having a fantastic day today. I know I am, which is why I'm so happy to make this video today discussing the leftist Remoaner meltdown after Boris Johnson, Prime Minister Boris Johnson in the United Kingdom, has shut down Parliament for 5 weeks in order to prevent a further delay on the Brexit issue. He promised that he would get Britain out by the end of October, and it does appear that he's doing what he can to actually deliver on that promise, which is a breath of fresh air. He might be pro-immigration, but at least he's delivering on the Brexit issue. Once Britain is out of the European Union, they can then start fixing problems like the invasion of their territory by foreigners at the behest of the globalist ruling oligarchy. But anyway, got a few little articles to go over today. Let's get into them right now.
Just a quick message. Whether it's an algorithm hiding content or outright deletion, internet censorship is on the rise. Please consider following me on free speech websites Gab, Minds, and BitChute. I'm constantly posting content, and they are a great way to stay notified of uploads. Can't wait to see you there.
So first up, we have an article that appeared in The Australian and was actually written by The Economist, discussing how MPs can still evade the no deal, really pushing hard on preventing what I believe to be the most optimal situation of a no deal Brexit. Just get out, renegotiate later from a position of strength. The European Union needs Britain more than the other way around, so they may as well just leave and then force the EU to come back to the negotiation table, because they're not doing that right now. Anyway, I won't go through the whole article. All the sources will be linked in the description in one way or another. I just wanted to let you know the general gist of the article in order to show exactly how the establishment are melting down over this. So they said the Prime Minister claimed this was a normal way for a new government to set out its plan on crime, health and so on. Yet his main goal is the cynical one of shortening the time when MPs may stop a no-deal Brexit. See, this is how these globalist ruling class operations operate. They use subtle propaganda, like calling it a cynical move by Boris Johnson. A normal person looks at it and goes, that's a shrewd move. It's shrewd and intelligent because it puts these Remoaners, these anti-democratic Remoaners, on the back foot. It forces them to react to him. They now have to rush to resist the no-deal Brexit, and there's really not much else that they can do. It's going to make them run around like headless chooks. They're not going to know what to do. It'll be interesting to see how they react when Parliament resumes. But calling it cynical? No, it's not cynical. It's very intelligent. These people have been dragging their feet and doing all they can to resist the will of the British people, the very clear will of the British people. And maybe it takes something like this in order to implement that will, because most MPs are treasonous Remoaners. And they say here, so no deal risk rising. One conclusion from these events must be that the risk of a no deal is rising fast. 2 months ago, Johnson talked of it being a 1 in a million to 1 against. Now he says it is touch and go. Again, notice the language. Notice the use of the word risk. See, a normal person says that there is a risk of the UK still remaining in the EU. But the Economist, who is owned, or 20% owned by the Rothschild family, says that there is a risk of a no-deal Brexit. See, a no-deal Brexit right now is the optimum situation. It means Britain can just get out and renegotiate from there. So there's no risk there. It's an opportunity for a no-deal Brexit. And then they have here 6 ways that MPs can still thwart no deal, really encouraging people in the UK Parliament to stop the democratic will of the British people, saying that they can call an emergency debate, they can do a vote of no confidence and get a general election. They can do a vote of no confidence and put in a caretaker government. They can take it to the courts. A humble address, I'm not sure what that is, under a plan pushed by the opposition parties, including the Scottish National Party, the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. 47 MPs have signed an early day motion demanding a humble address to the Queen, asking her not to prorogue Parliament before November 8. But early day motions are not binding, and the humble address procedure previously used to command the release of Brexit impacts assessments is complicated, so whatever that means. And bring back May's deal, which was resoundingly rejected by not just Parliament, but by the British people who hated it, which is why May is now gone. But that's just a summary of this article. We can move on and see here that apparently hundreds of thousands to rally against Johnson's prorogation. Like usual, they claim it's going to be hundreds of thousands, but what will probably happen is maybe there'll be a few thousand, maybe 10, 20,000, and the media will just take close-up shots like you can see here and claim that it was hundreds of thousands people protesting against implementing the democratic will of the British people. So it's just absolute rubbish. But here they say British protesters plan to target lead Brexiteer Jacob Rees-Mogg's home today as hundreds of thousands plan mass demonstrations across the country after Boris Johnson's decision to prorogue Parliament. Just having a giant sook. A massive sook that the Prime Minister of Britain would dare implement the democratic will of the British people. They voted very clearly to leave the EU. Protesting against that, it's an attack on the British people. It's an attack on British sovereignty. And it's just a giant dummy spit. Would they accept it if they had won and the other side started protesting? No, of course they wouldn't. They're just whining. They lost. They should get over it and stop protesting because it just increases disunity. And then Jeremy Corbyn has encouraged his supporters to join protesters planning to shut down the streets in the biggest act of civil disobedience in decades. One campaigner pledged civil disobedience in whatever form it takes. So they don't get what they want. The country voted in a way that they don't like, so they have to throw the toys out of the cot and complain about it as loudly as possible because they're spoiled brats who just can't handle not getting their own way. It's really all it is. They lost. Britain needs to leave. No deal Brexit is the ideal. And then, of course, the Egyptian man, Waleed Ali, has to weigh in and he's complaining that there's contradictions here. Again, I'll link all the articles that we're going through in the description if you do want to read them in full, but just these two paragraphs here really just highlight exactly how Waleed Ali operates. I have responded to his articles before and I did a full video on Waleed Ali, which is actually on my BitChute account. Again, link in the description to my BitChute account, Gab, Minds, all that, if you want to follow me elsewhere. But the way Waleed Ali operates is he gaslights and he puts in subtle lies in the hope that you won't notice, but he tries to make it seem as reasonable as possible because that's just the way he operates. So we see Johnson has effectively told the Parliament they'll have to accept the hard no-deal Brexit he supports or bring on a no-confidence motion against him. The latter would trigger an election he would badge as a People versus Parliament election. Yeah, pretty much. That's what he's done. He's putting cards on the table. He's going all in and he's saying, this is how it is. If you don't like it, well, do something about it. And here's the lie. The trouble with that democratic argument is that while it's true that people voted for Brexit, it's also true they weren't given a particular version of it to consider in the first place. When you do offer a particular version of something for public vote, the majority very quickly falls apart. And this is the lie. It wasn't about a particular system. They weren't voting on a particular system of government. Like he's trying to liken it to the 1999 referendum here, where apparently Australians voted against it because the system wasn't clear. I think we would have voted against it regardless. But the point he's trying to make is that, oh, well, they didn't say how we were going to leave, therefore we shouldn't leave. I mean, no. It was a very, very clear decision. Leave or stay. Britain voted to leave. That means Britain needs to leave. Whatever happens, whatever deal they do, it must involve Britain completely leaving the EU. Sure, they can still trade with the EU. There's nothing wrong with trading with the EU. But no more political integration in any way, and no more allowing people to just travel indiscriminately from Europe into Britain. They voted to leave. That means they need to leave. And this is just saying, oh, well, but. No, you're grasping at straws. The lie is that it matters. It does not matter because they voted to leave and they need to leave. And next up, we have the far left Guardian. A civil war state of mind now threatens our democracy. Isn't that funny that the threat to democracy is apparently a civil war state of mind and Boris Johnson's assault on Parliament? So, why is it that the threat to democracy isn't coming from people who are doing everything they can to thwart the very clear will of the people? The people voted clearly to leave. How can anyone in their right mind accept the ridiculous argument that leaving is now a threat to democracy? I mean, it's just garbage. Absolute and utter piffle. It makes no sense whatsoever. But because these people invert truth in order to push their agenda, it's a satanic agenda, this is how they operate and this is what they say, and NPCs and sycophants believe it. And here we have the sense of violation of democracy reverberates everywhere. But what should civil servants do when power is seized in front of their eyes? Do they carry on obeying orders to drive the country into a no-deal Brexit disaster when they see Parliament barred from the nation-changing decision? I ask Bob Kerslake, former head of the civil service, where their duty lies in this unprecedented situation. And he says, we are reaching the point where the civil service must consider putting its stewardship of the country ahead of the service to government of the day. So let what she's saying here and what this bloke Bob is saying sink in. They are again arguing that it is a violation of democracy for Boris Johnson to implement the democratic will of the people. They lost the vote and they are arguing that enacting the result of that vote is anti-democratic, and this bloke Bob is saying that the civil service should essentially just disobey the government in every way they can. They should stop doing their job, which is to serve the will of Parliament and thus the people of Britain in order to further their own Remoaner objectives. It's utterly bizarre. It's a direct assault on the British people. It's so divisive. And these people have the nerve to claim that it's leave voters and people who want to leave the EU that are the problem, the ones causing division. No, it is all coming from the globalists, the oligarchy, and the leftists. You call them leftists, communists, socialists, NPCs, SJWs, all these people who are brainwashed by the oligarchy that are pushing the anti-democratic, anti-British idea that despite the country overwhelmingly voting to leave, that it is somehow anti-democratic to then leave. That just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And finally, this bloke from the Mirror, or this guy Lloyd Russell Moyle, who is an MP, said a general strike is the only way to stop Boris Johnson's coup. It's a coup to want to implement the democratic will of the people. And It's such a evil coup that everyone should drop their tools and stop working because Boris Johnson, picked a lovely picture here, Boris Johnson has the nerve to want to implement the democratic will of the British people. These people are insane. There is absolutely no other way to describe it. They are insane. They've inverted the truth in their minds. They live in an inverted reality outside of the true reality, and they actually believe the nonsense that they're speaking. No, I think it's a fantastic move by Boris Johnson. What it means is we are now closer to actually getting Britain out of the EU. The British motherland could finally regain its sovereignty, and this will be a big step towards fixing the damage done by the globalist usurpation of Western sovereignty. That said, hope you enjoy the video, share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.